We're going to bake textures from a high poly 3D scan mesh of a shirt to a low poly retopologized mesh of the same shirt. Here I have the 3D scan and I can hide it, and that reveals this low poly scan. If I tab into edit mode, you can see that everything is generally evenly spaced and it has its seams marked. This is important for UV unwrapping in the texture baking stage. I have a video showing you how to retopologize 3D scans into low poly clothing meshes, linked in the description. In addition, I've also applied a subdivision surface modifier. To do that, click Add Modifier, Generate Subdivision Surface, and the same thing with a shrinkwrap modifier. Add Modifier, Deform, Shrinkwrap, with the target being the 3D scan. This allows for the vertexes to snap just a little bit better to the surface of the mesh. If I bring back the 3D scan, we can see that it has texture, but our shirt does not have texture. It is just this white default Blender material. In order to bake textures from a high poly mesh to a low poly mesh in Blender, we need to create a material. Click the Material tab, which is this red little ball, and click New. Label this material Shirt Bake Texture. Under Base Color, click the little dot and add an image texture. Now it's just black because there's nothing in this image. Click New, label this image Shirt Baked Diffuse. This will come in default by 1024 pixels, but you can make it 496 pixels to have more resolution, and you can uncheck alpha unless you actually need alpha. Then click New Image. Now we need to do a little preparation in the Shading tab in Blender to be able to bake textures from high poly meshes to low poly meshes. Click Shading. In the Shading tab, if I click on Shirt Bake Diffuse, notice it's all black. In order for the texture bake to work, I need to disconnect it from its principled BSDF shader in Blender. I also need to make sure that it's enabled in the render. Then I have my 3D scan. If I click on its texture image, it has all the information from the 3D scan texture. So first, click on the 3D scan, then hold Control, click on the shirt. That brings the shirt up in the shader nodes here, but the most important step is now I need to click on the texture image. Now this texture image is highlighted and I can use it for the texture bake. Then click the camera, and I need to make sure that I'm not on Eevee. Baking only works in cycles in Blender, so select Cycles. Then scroll down to Bake. By default, it will be on Combined. Switch from Combined to Diffuse, and by default, Direct and Indirect will be on. This is in case you want to actually bake lighting into your textures. We don't want to bake the lighting, we just want the textures, so uncheck that. We just want to bake the color. And then by default, Selected to Active will be unchecked. Make sure we select this, and then we'll add a cage. This allows the rays to reach out farther so you don't have any black spots on your texture. Often 0.05 is plenty, that's 5 millimeters, but you can go up to 8 or even 10 millimeters. Once you have all those things selected, it's a good idea to save your file just in case the bake overwrites something. Then select Bake. Once it's done baking, you'll see all the pieces of your cloth folded out just like your UVs. And since we're using the seams of actual patterns of the clothing, you'll see it look just like clothing. Here you can see the two sleeves, the front of the shirt, the back of the shirt. Notice that there's this black spot. This is because the cage was not far enough in this section. So you can either fix that texture manually with just a little bit of healing in Photoshop or Substance Painter, or you can just extend the cage a little bit or modify that section. So you can see that it's over here, that it's just a little bit sticking out so it doesn't quite have the correct bake. But it's very easy just to fix that by extending the cage. The last step to be able to see your texture is to hide the 3D scan or the high poly mesh and then connect the diffuse texture to the base color. Once you do that, you'll see the texture on your low poly mesh. Change the incidence of refraction to something that's appropriate for your material, and you can preview it very easily. Hopefully this allows you to bake textures from high poly meshes to low poly meshes in Blender. Happy 3D modeling.